And I probably will disagree with maybe 80% of that statement, because it certainly is up. It certainly is up. I think every coach has their style, their persona, their personality. That doesn't mean that you can't scale the product and the service.
So how long have you been open Athletes Authority?
We've been sort of officially in this formation when I brought in, it's been 5 years. But to be honest, mate, every 6 months, I reckon we had an evolution, a reiteration of what we did, what we offered. Like when I first came in, we had a weightlifting group, we had a powerlifting group, we had general members. It was just chaos. So probably it has now been, I think, we've been 13 months, 14 months, where we've been just athletes, but also we've just been a performance program, and we've had a physio tacked on. And the rehab program, that's probably been 8 months, 8 or 9 months, where we've had just performance program, rehab program. They're our two options.
So when you're at the Eels, did you kind of have a foot in each? Like you started up Athletes Authority whilst you're at the Eels?
Well, I was at the Giants, yeah. So I brought him when I was at the Giants. I was actually going to leave. I had 1 more year on my contract at the Giants, and I was, at that stage, I was going to go, I'll do 1 more year at the Giants, and then I'll go into Athletes Authority. And then the option came up at Para, and I chatted with Carl, obviously the business owner that I share 50-50 with. And mate, we just said, look, it's at this moment, it's stable. He can manage without me, and it'd be great, especially being based in Sydney, to have one of the owners. And at that time, obviously, I was coaching full time. Well, I was going to be coaching full time at AA. To have that NRL experience and lean on both AFL and NRL. So I took the opportunity. And to be honest, it was great. I think it was a really, really good move. I was sort of in my head maybe 3 years at Para, but this just got too big here. And to be honest, Carl would have killed me if I didn't step away when I did.
Do you feel like there was, not in a bad way, but like a desire to test and like that ego of like, I want to be ahead of performance. I want to show that I can do this. Like that was like when I came to America, I was like, fuck it. I want to show that I can do it in more than one sport, more than one place. Did you have that itch that you wanted to scratch?
But I think I don't know if it was my itch or if it was an industry itch. Like I think the way I came through and when I started, head of performance or a high performance manager was always the pinnacle. It's always the top. That's where you want to go. You want to run a program. And the way I evolved at the Giants, like my role, that I look back now, like I loved my role at the Giants. Sort of, some people sort of take the piss out of it, like head of strength and power. So you don't even go on the field, this type of stuff. You just go to the gym. But we did a lot of the speed, the agility side of things, then into the gym, all of the strength work there. And I managed my own program. And Joycey, who was my manager at the time, mate, he gave me the freedom like this. He wasn't overpowering. He was always there to assist. And it was my program to run, which I loved. But regardless, there's always that thing, the pinnacle is the next step. The pinnacle is to be the boss, to be over physio, to be over the strength conditioning, the field and stuff like that. And going to Para obviously gave me that opportunity. I reckon then going into a managerial role, I probably didn't realise how much you step away from a lot of the coaching, a lot of the connections that you form with athletes. I love Para. To be honest, it was probably the group there were really fun to work with. And the buy-in you have, like game day, I think you've got far more on the line. I think is that anyone under the performance manager, you can kind of, someone does a hamstring, you're like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean it was my thing. It could be someone else. Whereas I think the performance manager, when something happens, it's very much, I feel like I rode that wave far more, which you love and hate. It's sort of a bittersweet thing of it. But I think looking back now, and even in the role I'm in now, like I don't coach at the moment, because if I'm coaching here, it means that whatever we replicate in another city, I have to be there. So at the moment, it's sort of like I'm sitting on the bench watching my team and hoping that nothing fucks up, because if it doesn't,
because you know that you can do it better than anyone else, right?
Well, you sort of you actually miss the drive going. Like I find I'm far more productive if I've been coaching on the gym floor and then I go and have to write up something or I have to do something administrative. Now I turn up, everyone else is coaching, and you try and get into the energy, you just feel like this random outsider, like, yeah, guys, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I think it has to be done, because there's no way we can make another facility if we don't 100% know that this model works. So that's why I say, for me, I'm sitting on the bench, but it's not forever. I just want to make sure this works. Once it does, then I'll take up some coaching hours and then get back to actually doing something a little bit more practical. But yeah, the managerial role is obviously now the head, the boss, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know. It's for me, the way I look at it now, it's easy to look at it when you've done it and then you turn back around. But it's definitely not a role that a lot of people would want. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people saying, I don't want to be a performance manager. I want to be a head strength conditioning coach. I want to lead a strength program, or I want to be a speed coach. So these type of niches, you've got to do what you love. And I look back now, and as much as I love being a para, don't get me wrong, I think the daily satisfaction of being in the gym with the boys, making direct changes, seeing the influence, being sort of a little bit more front of house with them, I think that suits me a little bit more.
It strikes me that Australia is the only place that I've really seen like he's the speed guy, he's the strength and power guy, they're going to bring in a conditioning guy and so on. And it strikes me that that's very difficult to do, because the human instinct is always that you want your pound of flesh. And, well, I don't want to give up my bit if that guy's going to get more and so on. And it almost needs someone like Joycey with that skill set to manage it, because you see other places where you don't have a high performance manager like that, where it is like one hand doesn't know what the other's doing and everybody wants their pound of flesh, and it just doesn't work. But it's strange, in my experience, Australia is the only country where I've seen that model be replicated.
I don't know where that's cut. I don't know what was the chicken or the egg. I don't know if some club put a performance manager in that wanted to have all these people, or a club got all these people in and thought, oh crap, we need someone to actually lead the herd, so we'll put in what we're going to term a performance manager. The AFL is synonymous with having a performance manager, a director of directors, a director of coaching and performance. Like, they've got so many levels, it's beyond ridiculous sometimes. But I've been, the AFL model at the Giants was probably the most like that. Like, there's probably very few even AFL clubs that had as many levels and as many moving parts as we did in that department, and I think it worked very well. Then going to the NRL, obviously far less staff, very different style, but still had that performance model. But for me, anyway, in my department, I didn't have a strength and power and a conditioning. I ended up having a strength and conditioning across both, and that was a discussion with the head coach at the time, Brad. He was very keen. He wanted the person who was making them bigger and stronger to be responsible for any negativity that would occur on the field. And that, what he meant by that is, I don't want someone just getting them big and strong and then saying, well, it's the conditioning guy's job to get them fit. And the conditioning guy is saying, well, I just need to get them fit. I don't worry if they're strong. Now, as we all know, you hope that a strength and a conditioning coach work well together, and they're not like that. But I could certainly see his mentality and what he wanted out of it. And NRL is a different beast to AFL.
It strikes me that what you described would have been the model that I would have preferred. Like, not be like, well, you're going to do strength and power for everyone, you're going to do conditioning for everyone. It'd be like, okay, you're going to have the front rowers and loose forwards, you're going to have the edges, you're going to have the outside backs, all that kind of stuff, and then you're across everything. And it's almost like, you mentioned that athlete connection. You're spending a lot more time with guys. They feel a lot more invested in you and vice versa. And then you're able to move all those chess pieces around the board.
Yeah, 100%. And in the AFL side, I can see the value where you are a little bit more siloed. Although you become good at communication, you have to be. You're not actually acting as siloed. But we have 52 on our list. Of those 52 athletes, the AFL naturally has a fairly large injury list at any one time. There's a lot of running in AFL, so they do accumulate a lot of overload things. So, we could have a list of 11 people that are sitting in this rehab or injury list. So you sort of, when it comes to managing people, like, wow, field was on, I could have 10 or 11 people in the gym. Wow, field was on. And then when they roll through, they'll roll through 3, sometimes 4 hours of rotation in the gym in groups of 10 to 14. So it's sort of like, you could see the value where, for me, keeping my focus on that strength and rehab, the power side of it, is of value, because I'm hopeless to them outside because I don't even get to step outside at this stage because there's so many people rolling through the gym with so many needs and stuff like that having a conditioning coach, because of the value of conditioning in AFL, they're in training, they're running 12Ks in a training session. So making sure they're doing what they're meant to be doing, and then it flows into that, as you know, in Australia and the UK is the same. The GPS sort of love is huge. So having someone managing the GPS loads and being on those type of things, it probably does become a battle that's too big for just one person to be across all of that. So I could certainly see it. But then going to the NRL, it was in my head, I'm like, oh, we'll get someone to run the rehab side. But you're like, you have 2 people, if you're unlucky.
It's a good problem to have, though, because it means, the squad's healthy. I mean, I don't know about you, but like my rule of thumb was always 10% was my red flag. If we have more than 10% unavailable right now, that's a crazy red flag. And if more than half of those are non-contact, that's a big red flag. And I can tell you, there was a college football program that I heard about. And I think in one 12-month span, they had 14 athletes at some point in that 12 months that had to rehab an ACL. So they inherited some and they caused a ton. And that guy got a $150,000 pay rise at his next job.
I don't know.
America.
I don't know how that happens.
A lot of negligence.
I think there's probably another level to that 10% rule as well. It's what is the quality of those people that are injured? Because I can tell you right now, in the NRL, if one of my top 13 guys were injured, then it's far, even if there's just one, it's far bigger deal than if I had 5 of my bottom 10 injured. So,
yeah, that's the nuance is like not all of those stats are created equally. If they are unavailable, is it, 1 week and he's back, 2 weeks and he's back, or is it, Christian McCaffrey, you look at him with the Panthers. I want to say that he got a grade 1 hamstring, which if you're about it is 1 to 3 weeks. He's been out for 3 months and he's going to miss the rest of the season.
Yeah. How people quantify their injuries is very interesting as well. Like the AFL is starting to get quite strict. The NRL is getting better. But it was like when the injury data comes out at the end of the year, like I look at some of the rankings and knowing who I've spoken to and what injuries they had and injuries were reported. And then I see the end of season like injury report. I'm like, this doesn't match up. Like, I don't know how they've managed to have this little injuries when I can go through the history and see that they've actually publicly accounted for a number of higher injuries. So the way they actually class their injuries is all over the place. The AFL is far more strict and a little bit better with it. But yeah, the NRL injury, the way they ranked it, the way they rated their injuries, mate, was very strange. But
I was really obsessed with that at some point in our preparation for Tokyo. And I remember like watching, because NRL was one of the first sports out of COVID that had an audience. So people had in stadiums. So it was actually fun to watch. Everything else just seemed staged. Like final of the Champions League, there's no one that stands like, that's not a real game. So I was watching a lot of NRL and you would see like every now and then on the games and the bumps and like some niggles and stuff. So I was like, oh, let's see the reports. And I just go into the website and some clubs have 0 soft tissue injury reports. Like, I'm sure I've watched the game
fucking Roosters,
and I've seen a guy walk off holding his like thigh, and this club has 0. Wow, they're either like really good at recovering or really bad at reporting. Because I was like, there must be something wrong.
It's definitely the second one. But also, in saying that, like obviously, I'm only talking from AFL to NRL. They're the only 2 sports I can draw context from. But in the AFL, a player would turn up in the morning and go, the groin's a little bit sore. And when you put that into an AFL training load, there's always going to be negative things. They're always going to get worse or something's going to happen. So in AFL, that's a huge flag. Whereas in NRL, someone turns up like, the groin's a little bit grumbly. 90% of the time, they can get through and get no worse because the style of training is very different. They don't have the same run. And obviously, especially in season, they don't have the same running loads. They don't have the same volume that goes into them. And the NRL boys are a lot more tolerant and resilient of things. Often they might complain just as much, but physically they get through it more. So I definitely know from an injury stat is far less. You look at it and again, you can argue the cows come home, but I think I look at the AFL guys that get smacked, but they often get smacked from behind, from the side, and they don't know it's coming.
Those are the ones that hurt you.
Yeah, exactly. And they're only 80 kilos. But in the NRL boys, they're like 120 kilos going front on, but they know exactly what they're going to cop. And that doesn't mean they don't get injured still, but I feel like there's far less injuries in that sense because they're prepared for it. They know what's coming.
Well, they can brace and be ready to get that like that switch on, switch off that usually pulls something. You're not ready and just like really try to absorb the low like strength very quickly, but you're not aware. So bang, contact stuff.
The most impressive thing still to this day in the NRL for me is when I went from AFL to NRL, everyone goes, oh, they're such big boys in the NRL, big collisions, huge guys. I'm like, yeah, fuck that. There's some big boys there. But I look across some of the squads. I'll use Parramatta, who I work for. We had two guys, Mitch Moses and Clint Gutherson, who were both anywhere between, depending on the day, sort of 82 for Mitch Moses up to about 90 kilos for Guther, which is pretty much the same as what an AFL player is. They're a similar height, similar size. Mitch Moses, 82 kilos, would be like a midfielder, maybe outside midfielder in the AFL, running and barely getting touched. In NRL, he's hitting 130 kilo blokes. Now, given he bounces off every now and then, he's not quite like a 100 kilo bloke hitting 130, but he would get through the game. And that, to me, that's like, there is this AFL bloke that's fucking hitting these absolute massive monsters and walking away just like it's standard. And I just look at it, like, still to this day, it blows me away. And AFL players are standing there going, NRL boys are so big, like they get smashed and they're all being like, there's a number of NRL boys that are the same size, same fitness and speed level as you, still hitting 130 kilo blokes, and it still blows me away today.
What do you think the opportunities for cross-pollination are between those sports? Because I feel like, because, as you mentioned, because of those organizational structures and the level of sports science, they're probably a step ahead in the AFL. It always seemed to me like there was always more pollination from AFL to NRL, particularly with regard to the conditioning because of the running demands and so on. Do you think there's some that can go the other way?
Look, the answer is yes, across both. If you look at what's currently occurring, like there's a number of AFL coaches that are working in the AFL that might be development coaches that are also hired by NRL clubs as kicking coaches. And then the vice versa, especially Melbourne with the Melbourne Storm. I know that them and Carlton used to share a facility, and Carlton used to use Storm for a lot of tackling practice. So although the AFL tackling is different to NRL, it's not as simple as just hit them as hard as you can. In the AFL, you want to try and wrap your arms up. There's a little bit of nuance there. But cross-pollination, if we're talking about like whether it be skills coaches or strength conditioning coaches, from a skills standpoint, anything tackling, wrestling, those type of things, hugely valuable in AFL, I think. Not just because they tackle, but because of the fitness demands of impact and wrestling, and something that I probably appreciated more being in the NRL, just how much being hit, and we all know it when you say it out loud, it sounds stupid, but being hit in wrestling, it just takes it out. It's a different style of anaerobic exertion that you just don't get when you run. Even when you hit bags, it's not the fucking same. So that even if they're not on their backs wrestling in the AFL, there's a lot of clubs now going along the route of, well, let's do tackling practice, rolling into some impact and some body hardness work, because body hardness is a thing. Fuck, if you haven't been hit for a couple of weeks and then you get hit, you have bombs the next day. Like the muscle didn't even change length. You just got hit. You can't even lift your fucking arm up. So being accustomed to being hit is a thing. And having that in the bank of training is so important. And then adding on, as I said, that wrestling component where they will not wrestle like they do in NRL, but the sheer energy systems that are required for that, I think, are very important. Then from a strength and conditioning standpoint, like I think the conditioning, the GPS, the sports science flows back into the NRL really well from AFL. They're learning a lot from the AFL side of things. But I think from the NRL side, putting across a lot of the strength and power things in some of their programs can be quite important, because I was lucky enough for the Giants. I got them when they were young, and I worked with them for a lot of years going forward without any other influences. And they bought into getting strong. They lifted well. They lifted heavy. That was just what they did. They did plyometric training. They did Olympic lifting for some of them. They did really explosive velocity-based jumping work with loads. Like they're actually...
I'm going to stop you, right? Yeah. If TikTok had existed when you went hamstring viral, you probably Wouldn't even have to work right now.
You are the razor curl. Everyone's seen the razor curl. Everyone's
seen it, bro. Tremendous.
Great. That's what I want to be known for. Yeah, that's.
It's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. Being a guy gets you paid, but once you become a guy, if you do something that doesn't fit that, be like, why aren't you using your thing?
How dare you? How dare you? Yeah, no, I agree, man. Well, I think you were the first to message me because I hope he doesn't blow his hamstring
down. In terms of the business, one thing I think people will relate to with brick and mortar and training in general, as you mentioned, you alluded to it, the goal of business is scale and uncoupling input and output. But with training being science and art, I found it's inherently unscalable. So as a business owner, how do you tackle that challenge without compromising on the quality?
Yeah, and I probably will disagree with maybe 80% of that statement because it certainly is up. It certainly is up. I think every coach has their style, their persona, their personality. That doesn't mean that you can't scale the product and the service. The nuance of getting that persona, that style, is hiring correctly. So when we hire, we want to hire someone that actually connects with people. Someone that can take the piss out of themselves. Someone that has thick skin for things, that takes feedback well. When you start to hire based off these things, you ultimately will get coaches that have a really good art because they connect with the coach as well. Now, it may not be identical to you. And to be honest, I don't think it should always be because the scalable part is then the actual product that you're giving. And the way we scale here is all based on systematic approaches to everything we do. So we want athletes to be connected to our brand, not necessarily the coach. But in saying that, we want to have good enough coaches that athletes do connect with them. But when they leave, if one coach leaves, the whole place shouldn't fall down because athletes start to freak out. They've lost their coach. Yeah. So it's all about wording and setting up. So probably to start from the beginning, the way we scale our services is, as I said, to build out a systematic approach to it. So, for example, when we program, let's start with our testing and screening. We have our testing and screening we go through. From that, our sports scientist then collates that into a report. That report then produces, the nuance of what we're going to start to create a program from. All of our coaches understand our programming system, the way we lay it out, how we select our exercises from, we have a velocity block, a strength block, and then we roll into some resilience work at the end. Within that, they know how to quantify what level all of our athletes are in their velocity block, whether it be plyometric training, whether it be loaded jumps or light implement power. Into the strength block, they understand what exercises go in our A1 sequence, what they'll use in their A2, what they'll use in B1 and everything like that. So they start to understand all the progressions and they understand what fits into each of those categories. So when we see it on the gym floor, it flows. So whether there's a field athlete, a track athlete, a court-based athlete, it all flows on our facility downstairs. When I first came in, we had athletes on their phones in team build. Everyone had a completely different program walking around. There's 1,000 things going on. People were moving everywhere. Coaches were being pulled everywhere. It was a nightmare from a systems point of view. As we evolved into a clean system, suddenly now athletes flowed from where they prepped, where they did all their jumping work, into the racks to do all their main and key lifts. We had coaches that could distribute themselves well along the racks within the gym. They could coach well. Athletes were working together because if you play rugby and I play rugby, we're probably going to have the same A1 lift. We'll have different, modifications depending on position and stuff like that. But as you know, in Australia, pretty much all of our field sports have the same season. So majority of our field sport athletes are all in season or all pre-season at the same time. So suddenly I'm talking to you because we're doing the same lift. We're spotting each other, we're working together. And that culture completely changes the feel of the gym because previously you were doing a box squat and I was doing a trap bar deadlift, so we wouldn't talk to each other. We might see each other, but suddenly if we're doing the same lift, and as we know, when it comes to sport specificity, as far as I'm concerned, there's fucking way more similarities than there are differences. Yeah, and that's what we bank on. We bank on being the core similarities for our group to connect. and then we layer in those differences.
People talk about franchising business, that kind of like, how do you build a moat to stop someone setting up shop across the street and lowering the price? Do you feel like that social pressure, not in a good way, social pressure, the social cohesion, personal touch, and like the level of service, that's like your franchise that you built into it?
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest, we'll never franchise. We're not an F45. We're not going to have 10.
Sorry, I used the wrong word. So a kind of like, that's what's keeping them.
Yes, yeah. So probably a couple of things. One, we're the only gym in Sydney, I'd almost argue Australia, that is only athletes. Every other gym will have...
That's only athletes. I was going to ask that because in the States, you alluded to it with the seasonal business, in the US, there is a horrible track record of facilities that cater to only athletes in terms of making money and keeping the lights on. Like even Mike Boyle trains housewives. Yeah.
So we are only athletes. Now, if we were, and we alluded to sort of the beginning when we were talking about coming out of COVID and the new hiring of a number of our physios, there's no doubt that we leverage a lot of our revenue off our rehab program, but our rehab program is only athletes. So we have our performance program and our rehab program. To get through the doors, you have to be an athlete. And when I say athlete, that means you're either an obvious high performer, elite athlete, or aspiring athlete. But that doesn't mean we don't have a third grade rugby player that wants to get to second grade. We have them, but they have to have the desire and the only desire to train to get better at their sport. If they're coming in, they play rugby, but what they actually want to do is bodybuilding and get ripped. That's not us. You might play sport, but you don't term, the athlete is someone who is training to get better at their sport. So we do have third graders that want to get to second grade, but guess what? Some of them train fucking harder than the most elite athletes we have because they enjoy, they just love the culture, the buy-in, they love that field. But our rehab program is the same. If you're not returning to sport, then you don't come through our rehab program. And the thing that makes us different, that you mentioned, what stops someone from opening next door? We've actually gone the other way. If you start trying to beat people on price, it's only a race to the bottom. And there's only one place to go, fucking zero. And I can tell you right now, you're not going to beat Fitness First and Anytime Fitness that can just afford to lose money at one end and make money at the other, and they'll just keep beating you and then come back up again. We go the other way. Ours, by far, we're the most expensive facility in Australia, I would imagine. On top of that, we have contracts and we lock people in. Our ADP, you have to be in for 12 months because you're not a part-time athlete. If you're an athlete and you want to get better at your sport, well, you're committing. And that changes the culture as well. Same as the rehab. Our rehab model is almost unheard of in Australia. I can't imagine there's anything in the States either, that if you come to me with an ACL, well, our ACL program is 12 months. It's a 9-month rehab and then 3 months in our performance program. So when you start with us, that's what you sign up to. It's not, we're going to do 3 physio sessions for the first 3 weeks and then we see you less.
Once they can jog. Oh, you can jog, off you go.
Yeah, exactly. It's the barrier to success with injuries in physio land and physical therapy side is come to me and work with me heaps at the beginning. Then as you're getting better, I'm still charging the same. And you're going, well, fuck, I can walk. Why would I bother coming? So people see less. So there's this barrier to actually doing the end stage stuff well. We remove that. Ours is a weekly amount and you sign up for the length of your rehab. So if you've got a shoulder reco, guess what? 6 months. That's our rehab timeline. Same in pro sport. I'd tell the head coach that, and everyone don't worry about timelines. It's all about exit and entry criteria. Well, at the end of the day, we're humans, we work in time. So you better fucking put your balls on the line and tell someone roughly how long it's going to be. So the same as I tell a head coach that there's variance, same as I tell an athlete that comes in here that, it's a shoulder, we're going to say 6 months. If something happens that goes longer, that's on us. So we'll cover that. We'll get you back. But the opposite is true as well. Like if you're flying after 5 months, or you've still got 1 more month that we're going to keep working with you because we know we want to try and secure that shoulder and make sure you're ready to return to performance, not just general function. So all of our rehab programs are based off timelines. Minimum is 3 months, and that's only sort of standard injuries, but every one of our rehab plans will be 6 months plus.
Awesome. In terms of your, like those business systems, how do you go about client acquisition? You just like word of mouth or like paid marketing? Or?
So early on was paid marketing, predominantly through Facebook and Instagram ads. We would have a sort of a value ladder. You know, we would have an ebook. We'd have some free resources, and when we say it's also what we post on Instagram, what I post on Instagram to engage people. The next level was then we would do often our performance testing is $497 if you just want to do the performance testing. But we use that as a leverage to get people in. So we did specials for $97, come in, an hour and a half of performance testing, and obviously we would hope to net people. That's how we sort of started. That was probably 12 months ago. I can hand on heart say the past 12 months, we have done almost zero marketing. We've recently just revamped some marketing, mainly because we have had so many rehab come in that our ratio to the number of rehabbers to the number of just performance athletes is quite different. So what we want to do is, we wanted to try and push the performance arm a little bit more to make sure we can get out and reach people. But other than that, we've got an ACL program. So it's probably good. We've got an ACL program here that we do pride ourselves on our protocol. We currently have 87 ACLs on our list for rehabbing, and we have not ever advertised an ACL program. Yeah. It is all from word of mouth, and that is by far our strongest. That critical.
Like selling water in the desert.
People
want that. They want a big fix. I would do a low back program and just hand out flyers outside CrossFit gyms.
Exactly, it's the same premise. Yeah, something with a low back program. We have a majority of the people that come to us now say, 6 months ago, I saw a video that you put up of an athlete rehabbing and thought, fuck, I really need to do that. And then I sort of forgot about it. But then I was at the footy and, someone was saying that their son was training with you and has got some really good results. And then, 2 weeks ago, I saw an Instagram post from you and I thought, fuck, I've got to come in. Yeah. So it feels like those stories are happening more where they hear it more than once or they get a touch point more than once and it sort of invokes them to come in.
Physios in Argentina are dying to go there. Like every time we repurpose something or I post a webinar or I've mentioned you or something, I've gone at least like 10 messages of people. I think a couple are just going to do masters in Australia and they want to be in touch with you, just like have like the 2-week placement experience or whatever and whatnot. They also follow one of your, I'm terrible with names, but one of your physios does a lot of like posts on LinkedIn. Yes, on LinkedIn and stuff. Mate, he just comes to Argentina and find a poster of himself on the highway. People worship him and like throwing flowers and shit. Let him know.
Don't tell him that. He'll be done, mate. I won't be able to speak to him, mate. He'll be sitting in his high chair. Oh, Jesus. That's great, man. Great to hear. That's what we love. And that's, to be honest, mate, that's we've purposely been very much about everything within our four walls doing very well. We've had probably the past 12 months, we've had a heap of people ask about education and that type of stuff. And we've been quite purposeful not to really do a lot because we've wanted to really nail everything in here. I'm assuming it's going to be the same overseas, but we fucking see it all the time here where people get this false sense of success. They then go and do 2-3 more facilities and they bomb out. And they really, like, a second facility is not just a replica of your first facility. There's so many things that can fail and go wrong. We've probably gone the other way. Maybe we've been too conservative, but we've been very much, we have just absolutely hammered the setup here. We've tried to create, like, every time we let it go, we think we've done it, something fucks up, something happens.
Walmart did not open their second supermarket until year 7.
There you go. Well, we could be the next Walmart.
I think Five Guys had, like, for 15 years, maybe 3. Yeah. But it's one of those things, like, it's better to know 100% it's going to work and then put your foot on the gas and be like, fuck, I hope this doesn't bankrupt me.
Mate, exactly. And I think we probably, and that's great to hear because I think the take a risk and it pays off is probably glorified more in business than the other way. Like, everyone talks about, like, this person, was it bloody UPS? Where they were down to the last 30,000 and the story he went to the bloody casino and put it on. Great. Well, how many people would have lost that? Like,
that's it. You have to look at the invisible graveyard. you're looking at the survivors. It's like, what about all the people that did that and died and washed out and went bankrupt?
100%. And in our local community, being in Sydney, we've seen it a number of times. So it's something we've really played. So mate, I'm stoked to hear that people want to hear more from us, because 2022 is sort of going to breach to be our education year. We want to get a lot of education out there. Unfortunately, to a lot of people overseas, most of that I want to make it face to face. I'm fucking sick of online stuff. No offense, Keith, because I know you do a lot of it. But
I mean, I was actually supposed to do some in Ireland in April of last year. Had to cancel.
And I think that's like some of those, like for example, like the fundamentals course is a phenomenal course to be able to have people get it, sit down, and go through step by step and just create such a really good foundation of knowledge. But for me, growing up in that face-to-face community where, I'm lazy.
You just plugged me there. I appreciate that.
That's going to be in the edit for the 10-second thumbnail. That's what it is.
Lives by. But like, if someone told me to watch 8 hours of video, I reckon straight away my head's like, when am I going to do that? Where am I going to find the time to do that? But if someone said, there's a Sunday course, so long as I can convince my missus to give me the day off, I can go there. I'll sit and watch 8 hours of lectures, and I walk away and go, how good's that? So for me, it's probably a bias. That's what I prefer. Therefore, that's probably what we want to try and push out. Where we can do online stuff, we've got a couple of modules we can release. We still want to be able to have that freedom for people, and I think it's shown that so many people do find the time and like that freedom. But I just love the face-to-face seminars, the courses, meeting people, the discussions you have. We've just had what we call a coach immersion program. We ran our first one last week, where 3 days people come in, they watch what we do, they learn all of our systems. It's 3 days of just a full immersion. And mate, I was exhausted at the end of it, but stoked. Like, it was, you go out to the dinners, you chat with people, there's so much more connection, and people probably, obviously then make those friends, those coaching companions. I want to say for life, but at least for a decent amount of time that they then leverage off later. So, hopefully that's where we'll sort of start to go if fucking COVID can just stop locking us down.
So to wrap up, because I have to go pick up the Japanese emperor from daycare. Where can people find you online, bro?
Mate, me personally, performance coach _Wilmot. I like to advertise on the first performance coach. I think everyone calls themselves performance coach on Instagram now. But I can't change it now. I'm locked in. And then Athletes Authority, all one word, on Instagram there. They're the two main ones. Obviously, just website as well, athletesauthority.com.au. But let's be honest, most people, social media, you'll be able to see everything and anything we do. We post up there, so hopefully we can get something out of it.
Well, man, congratulations on an extremely successful transition out of sport, and more success to you.
Thanks, mate. Honoured to come on, boys. Appreciate the time, mate.
Thank you.
Mate.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.